The desperation is pretty high right now. And a lot of patients I've worked with over the years, they've pretty much lost hope by the time they would see me. I see a lot of people now more early stage, but a lot of times they'd have seen literally 50 doctors, sometimes 60 doctors. And I'm asking them, like, what are you talking about? You've seen 60 doctors, you must be exaggerating. And they start telling me the story of
they've got their file,
how it began. And like, here's my encyclopedia of everything that I've been through. But they often have lost hope. And usually what I begin with is a conversation is, tell me what's going on. And then I often ask, what do you think is at the root here? And I realize that most of the time they've never been asked that.
No.
And they say, well, I think there was this time, I was traveling, I got food poisoning, but that was like 15 years ago. I told my doctors and all of them said, no, it couldn't be that. It's, that's way in the past. That'll be resolved. And I'll ask them, but do you think that? And they're like, yeah, I was never the same after that. And then we'll dive in deeper with a lot of the stuff that I do and toxicity testing and get into the root issue. And I'll find things that have been in the body for decades. And so I suppose I've developed a bit of a reputation for being like psychic or medically intuitive or something. And, maybe on some days it's more like that. But I've been reading patterns for a long time. And when you read patterns thousands of times, there'll be something in somebody's past where I'm looking for that. When did it shift? What was that? Oh, my dad yelled at me and I remember this memory and I never felt the same about myself after that. And it might take us a little bit to get down to these root issues, but that energy could be like a time capsule in the body and then it's stuck. And maybe it's stuck in the liver. Like even from an organ point of view, it could actually be disrupting liver function. But it's a memory of frustration, stress, anger, something like that. It gets stuck in the organs. And we never think of them that way because we weren't taught to think of them that way.
My God, no. Imagine, I'm sure there's people listening who are like, okay, my dad yelled at me when I'm 3 and now my liver's not functioning as well. Can you talk about how that pathway, like how that works? Because, when I read someone's, let's say their application for like a retreat or when I coach one-on-one, I could immediately see the patterns of language too.
Yeah.
And if I knew because they also would fill out some of their history, I could see what they chose, right? And there was so many, because after you've seen thousands of things, you're like, oh, that word is so telling, that sentence, that statement. So can you, maybe speak to what happens in the body physiologically that leads to something like impacting liver function at 3 or whatever, 5 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, in Chinese medicine theory, all the organs have a connected emotion. So the liver, that's more anger, frustration, stress, which makes the liver one of the hardest working organs, especially in our modern world. A lot of stress is rampant. That energy will start to get stuck in the liver. And what it does, though, is it can start affecting actually blood flow to the liver and then the ability of the liver to detox and clear itself out. So if you have somebody that's holding a huge amount of frustration, a lot of anger, repressed anger, because emotions are not bad, we need them.
Right.
But if they're not expressed properly or they're stuck in the body or they're really suppressed over a long period of time, it'll actually affect the organ itself. And so our liver is meant to detox, clear toxins, works with cholesterol and blood pressure, among other things. And its design is to govern smooth flow of energy and emotions through the body from a Chinese medicine point of view.
So it's like a detoxifier of all things.
All things, emotions, everything else. So if that filter gets stuck, you're going to start having issues. It's like an engine in a vehicle or something. You get a filter that's clogged up, things start backing up through the rest of the body. So the spleen, for example, that's more obsessive thinking, contemplation, like busy mind. The lungs is more grief and sadness. And the kidneys is more fear. So when I'm working with somebody, I read their intake form or we're chatting, I am listening to their words. I'm watching how they sit, how they talk, what their physiology, what their energy is saying. And I'll get a sense of, oh, they have so much tension in their kidneys. And they're like, oh, yeah, my adrenals are shot and this and that. I'm like, yeah, you've been in flight or fear all the time. When did that pattern begin? What's going on? And sometimes they're like, yeah, I've been struggling with kidney stones. I've been struggling with, I have like some kidney inflammatory condition now that I just got diagnosed with. So much fear for years will actually affect the function of the body. So if we're talking about anger, stress, usually get stuck in the liver. And of course, it can affect the other organs because we're one unit.
Right.
Anything going on in the body, the rest of the body is aware of it. So if
Yeah.
you start pounding the organ in an unhealthy way by asking it to hold way too much strain and tension, eventually, oh, hey, I got a blood test. My liver enzymes are off now. And the doctors are just like, well, yeah, we'll check it again in a few months. I know that they've been under a huge amount of stress, or I know that they've been having a lot of repressed anger that's been there long enough. Now it's physiologically affecting the organ. And now they have allergies and they are getting IBS and their guts don't feel right and they're not sleeping well. And you can just walk back through that whole chain of events. Because I kind of fancy
tells a
myself as an
story to you.
investigator,
Yeah.
okay, where did each of these entry points happen? And then maybe we get through a bunch of layers in the first visit. Maybe we get down to that core, oh, this moment is something that deeply affected your nervous system, and then it never got addressed. And then that pattern just carried on. And 20 years later, they have some kind of autoimmune condition, because I see that tons. It's on an exponential curve. And
Yeah, you see that a lot now.
yeah, it's not the body making a mistake. It's not the body attacking itself.